So good morning, everybody. My name is Tatiana Calderon. I'm the Autism Initiative Coordinator here at Synergia. Before we get started, I just wanted to present a little bit about Synergia. So just a few words about Synergia. Synergia is a multi-service agency located in Manhattan that has been supporting New Yorkers with disabilities and their families for more than 40 years. We offer a rich source of information and training tailored for parents, including parents whose primary language is not English or who they themselves have special training needs. We help them participate more effectively in their child's education and development, and we partner with professionals and policymakers to improve outcomes for all children with disability. Synergia, Spanish for Synergy, is one of the New York City's 3 federally funded parent centers committed to serving people with disabilities and their families with an added focus on communities of color and the economically disadvantaged. Synergia creates innovative programs ranging from transitional housing for homeless families who have children with disabilities, community residences for adults with developmental disabilities, parenting classes for adults and adult parents with intellectual disabilities, and parenting and education advocacy training for parents of children with disabilities. So I want to thank you all for being here today. We're absolutely thrilled to have you here with us in this space. So welcome to Synergia. Before we get into it, I just want to share a little bit of information about our presenters today. Today we have Dr. David Borg, school psychologist. Dr. David Borg is a psychologist with the AIMS program. He has been working as a psychologist for over 25 years and has worked exclusively with autism-specific programs for the last 7 years, first with ASD specialized programs and currently with the AIMS program. Dr. Borg supports families who are interested in applying to the AIMS program and helps to evaluate student eligibility. He is actively involved in the community outreach efforts so that families and community-based organizations can learn more about the AIMS program. The AIMS clinical team consists of Dr. Borg and his colleague, Ms. Julene Mays, AIMS clinical social worker. Together, they offer direct support to the AIMS program schools and families, including providing families with resources and information that can deliver service in the home and community. Thank you, Dr. Borg, for being here. And we also have Ms. Julene Mays, the school social worker. Julene Mays is the social worker for the New York City DOE District 75 Office of Autism. Her role is to help families procure services, facilitate communication between school and home, observe and assess children, provide home visits and family counseling, and help every student reach their full potential. Ms. Mays has 13 years of experience working with students of diverse populations, both in District 75 and community schools, including 12 years as a classroom teacher. The AIMS clinical team consists again of Ms. Julene Mays and her colleague, Dr. Borg, the school psychologist, who both work in direct support of schools and families. Welcome to Synergia. We're so happy that you could be here with us today. I know we have many questions for this presentation, so I'll let you guys get to it. Just letting you all know, this is being broadcasted Facebook Live, so please keep any personal or private information to a minimum, just because this is out there in public. And we will have space at the end for a Q&A. So thank you again to our presenters for being here, and I'll pass it on to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Tatiana. Really appreciate it. Good morning, folks, all the parents out there and others. Thank you again for joining us. First and foremost, I think it's really appropriate to thank Tatiana and all of her colleagues at Synergia. We do this each year with them. They are incredibly proactive, and I really think it speaks to their dedication and their mission statement in providing a direct conduit of resources and information to families. And we thank them for giving us this platform to reach out to you, the parents, who we'd also like to thank. So Tatiana, to you and your colleagues at Synergia for all the work you do and the advocacy that you provide families. Thank you so much. We really, really appreciate it. Just a couple of quick notes. Many of you have actually, as parents, I think the primary thanks go to you for sure. So we want to thank you for being as loving and involved and supportive of your children, especially at this very difficult time. The turning 5 process can be really, really challenging. Excuse me, I'm sorry. I apologize, it's just we're in an office. And to advocate for your children in the way that you do it's just so important. And the turning 5 process can be a very anxiety provoking one. We absolutely understand that. And we're going to do our best to make it as seamless and manageable as possible. But we want to thank you for advocating for your children, for being interested in the program, and for doing all that you do to reach out, to apply to the program and support them through the turning 5 process. Julene and I, we're the clinical team, and Ms. Mays will introduce herself in a moment, but I just also want to take the time to speak about Mark Corallo, who many of you may have actually had contact with or have met with or seen in some of the videos. So Mark is the director of the Office of Autism, under which AIMS is a specific program. Unfortunately, Mark, being the director of the program, he's out in the field today, directly supporting a school, working with staff, working with children. So Mark, unfortunately, can't be here today, but he is the director of the Office of Autism. And as we move forward through the turning 5 process, he is, as a boss and director, he's incredibly hands-on and wonderfully supportive. And he sends along his best and regrets that he can't be here today. Okay. And Ms. Mays, my colleague, if she can introduce herself.
Good morning. My name is Julene Mays. As mentioned, I am the social worker for the Office of Autism in the AIMS program. I would like to also thank Synergia for having us and for all that they do for families. Good morning again. I look forward to meeting each and every one of you and collaborating and see what we can do to what we can do for your child. Look very much forward to it. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Julene. So we're going to go through a slide presentation, and I don't want to kind of waste your time with just reading straight off the slides. So I'm going to do a lot of extemporaneous speaking. At the end, you will have our contact information. I just took a quick peek at the people who have logged in. So I do actually see a number of familiar names. So there are many of you who have already submitted programs to the AIMS application, so kudos to you. We have a pretty open window on that, meaning if you're joining this for the first time and you're just learning about AIMS today, that's fine. The turning 5 process is really in its earliest stages, and we'll talk about what that means. So if you haven't submitted an application, don't worry, but for those of you that have, again, kudos to you. You're very much on top of things, and I think it speaks to your diligence and involvement as the loving and supportive parents that you are. So to really just quick background, the AIMS clinical team and the office, the AIMS program itself, we moved out of infancy and we're moving into toddlerhood or childhood in a joking way. We're an early program is what I'm trying to say. This will be our 4th year. We started in 2019. We have a core, small but very dedicated and highly trained and extremely professional staff here. So in the Office of Autism, as I mentioned, we have Mark Corallo, who's the director. He has an extensive background in working with children with a variety of developmental needs and primarily speech and language conditions, but also very familiar in working with autism. He has extensive experience there. So he's the director. We have coaches, BCBAs. I'll talk about what that means, or board certified behavior analyst. Here in the Office of Autism, we refer to them as BCBAs or autism coaches. They're also intimately connected to and actively involved with the providing supports and services to the AIMS program, in addition to a whole host of other District 75 organizations in the DOE. Nicole Barnett, Nisha Murray, Cynthia Torres. Unfortunately, they couldn't be here today with us. They are, as BCBAs and coaches, as you might imagine, they are out in the field working at this very moment, probably with students and staff in the classroom, troubleshooting and helping to refine and develop the types of approach and strategies that we use in our various organizations to help children develop and grow to their maximum potential. And you know us. I'm Dave Borg, Dr. Borg, the psychologist, and Ms. Mays. So we're the team here in the office. Ms. Mays and I spend most of our time exclusively working with the AIMS program. A little bit about AIMS in general. So you'll hear a lot of ABA-VB. Really quickly, ABA, Applied Behavior Analysis, is a specific type of sort of a psychoeducational methodology and instructional approach that uses very specific sets of principles in order to help maximize, track, and develop and adjust IEPs and intervention plans to help students grow and continue to work towards achieving their goals. ABA is the applied behavior analysis, ABA, and VB is the specific type of ABA. ABA is kind of a broad term. VB stands for verbal behavior. It's the specific approach that we use in AIMS. If any of you took psych classes, B.F. Skinner, very famous American psychologist, it's an approach developed by him, and verbal behavior uses the principles and theories of what we call behavioral psychology, but it really kind of pinpoints and has a laser focus on language and communication. So the AIMS program is one of several application-based programs the New York City Department of Education offers for students who have been identified with autism, but our students have significant delays in language and communication, and verbal behavior is the ABA methodology that's geared towards that. We have on paper on the IEP, which we'll talk a lot about. Many of you are probably experts at IEPs already. You've gone through the CPSE process. You're very involved with your child's preschools all around the city. We get applications from every borough, and so we're pretty familiar with most of the preschools. So many of you understand that. I'll talk a little bit about why the Turning 5 process is important, and it's a little bit different and in some fundamentally critical ways between what we call CPSE, preschool, versus CSE, school age IEPs, some very important differences. But it's a 6-to-1-to-1 program, meaning there's 6 students in an AIMS classroom, a New York State certified special education teacher, and a well-trained paraprofessional who receives the supports in the AIMS program. What's unique about AIMS, there's a variety of things that are unique about AIMS, but in AIMS, we have the speech and language provider embedded in the classroom. We call that programmatic. So there are speech and language providers across every school in New York City. In AIMS, what we do is, in order to create that language and communication rich environment to spur growth and development, we embed the speech and language provider in the classroom. So really it kind of operates closer to what we call a 6-to-2-to-1. The 2 meaning the teacher and the speech provider. The way it's written on the IEP is a little bit different. It's your IEP, if a child is in the AIMS program, it says 6-to-1-to-1, but all of the speech services are listed as being provided in the classroom. Okay, we're a K-2 program. We start placing children here at the Turning 5 process as congratulations, as your child is graduating out of preschool, they articulate into kindergarten. That's the earliest they can be placed in an AIMS program, and it goes up through 2nd grade. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like and some of the questions parents commonly ask about that. And we accept applications at the Turning 5 process while the child is in kindergarten and 1st grade. We don't accept applications for 2nd graders, even though we do support them in the program. Okay, next slide, please. We started off with 5 locations. We've expanded up to 7, so we are slowly growing. Of course, you can't plan for life, and we all know what these last 3 years have been like. It's been very challenging. So our first year was in 2019, and of course in 2020, around March, COVID hit, and it had a significant impact, not just on us, that's the least of the concerns, really on the children. You know, we're seeing a lot of children and many of the current, what we call the 2018s, the Turning 5s this year, your children, your advocacy and your willingness to go above and beyond during extraordinarily difficult times is something you should be incredibly proud of as a parent, because getting preschool services and consistent services in the midst of COVID was an incredible challenge for all families and all children of all ages, but especially for preschoolers. So it was very, very difficult. We ran into that as well, but we have slowly expanded it. We've tried to refine and improve our systems. And so these are our locations below. In Brooklyn, we have the District 75 organization 231. We currently have a split site, meaning every AIMS site has 3 classrooms, right? 3 6-to-1-to-1 classrooms. In Brooklyn, we're transitioning from their Bay Ridge location over to their Borough Park. So beginning, we anticipate centralizing that in the Borough Park location. They're actually fairly close to each other. They're both located in District 20, and 231 is a District 75, District 75 organization that has a good track record and a fairly established pattern and program of working with an ABA-VB model. As an aside, just a quick, we're very excited and proud to have a new school. It's a single classroom and actually in a community school. It's the only Ames program that's not in a District 75 school in the Sunset Park area of Brooklyn, PS 958 in the southern part of District 15. The administration in that school comes from a very strong and well-versed background in District 75, ABA, VB in particular. And so it's a little bit, we're expanding and we're always looking to reinvent ourselves and provide new ways of supporting families. So this is kind of an endeavor that the DOE has decided to pursue, and we're very excited about it. So we have one classroom there. In the Bronx, we're over in the Throgs Neck section, all the way past, if any of you know, St. Raymond Cemetery, all the way down Lafayette, right between the Throgs Neck and the Whitestone. 10X, P10X is, I don't know this for sure. My understanding is they are the District 75 organization that has run an ABA-VB program for the longest and most continuous time of any District 75 organization in the city. So across all of their sites, they run a very, very well-established, well-run, coherent and consistent ABA-VB program. And they were actively involved several years back in helping us get the program up and running. In Manhattan, we have two locations, again, from a wonderful organization, P138, two of their locations in the Harlem area around 130th Street and 110th Street. So Manhattan actually has two locations. In Queens, we partner with 277Q, again, wonderful organization with a long history of working using an ABA-VB model. Here on the slideshow, and I apologize, this is on me, that says Corona. It was Corona. They have, this year, they moved their site literally down the block, like 3 or 4 streets down the block, but they're now in Elmhurst, which Corona, those of you that know the area of Queens know where Corona and Elmhurst border each other. So they're right down, it's not even a half a mile away from the original site. But the staff is largely intact, the administration, the providers, the level of professionalism and support has not changed, just the building has moved down for structural reasons. And in Staten Island, we have 37R. Staten Island in Annandale, it's in the kind of just below the midpoint of Staten Island. Again, they've come on board. They have been, what I believe is they've been very successful in establishing and getting an ABA-VB program up and running. They're working on expanding the methodology, using that approach as part of their broader organization, but that's where we're located in Staten Island. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so applying to the Ames program, for many of you, and I'm going to try to tailor this information to the Turning 5 process, because my understanding is that's the overwhelming majority of you have students and children in the during the Turning 5 process. If you don't, you'll have my email, Julene's email. So any questions, anything we don't cover, whether it's Turning 5 or school age, if we don't address it here and we're not able to get to questions, feel free to email us. But the application process is fairly simple in some ways. It's we have a standardized Ames program application that's available in multiple languages. In addition to English, I think we have 8 other languages that the application is available in that's standardized across all the forms that the DOE uses. And that's it. You can locate that online. If you're having trouble finding the application, there's an email address right there in the middle of the screen, amesprogram@schools.nyc.gov. amesprogram@schools.nyc.gov. If you would like an application in any of the languages that we have it translate into, just email that and say, I want an application, and you will get one. Right, that's all you need to do. And we'll also include a family guide as well. You can also reach out to myself or Ms. Mays, and we can forward you the application. And the application process is just that. You complete the application. It's not particularly cumbersome. We try to streamline it. So we're just going to ask for some basic information, child's name, birth, demographic stuff, the school they attend, things like that, a little bit of an area where you can elaborate and provide what you feel is the relevant information. And then you return it to that email address, amesprogram@schools.nyc.gov. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay. And then once we receive the application, you'll receive a confirmation email. So and then we begin the process of determining eligibility. So what's that like and what happens? So many of you, like I said, I was peeking at the names before. As many of you may have heard this already, so I'll try not to to be redundant with my spiel, but the Turning 5 process is something you're now embedded in. It's kind of hit, we're in third or fourth gear. And what happens is after you've applied to the program, so one note on the application process is the AIMS program with each successive year, and I think due in large part to the work of groups like Synergia and others, and the dedication and the involvement of families and the way families communicate, we've increased our applications. So at this point right now, we actually have double the number of applications that we had last year. So in 1 year, we've actually doubled. So that's my way of saying there's a lot of interest. The program is becoming better known, but there's a lot of demand for the program, which is wonderful, which is great. That families should be made aware of this. Families should have every right to apply to the program. I'll talk about how we try to manage that process. And then what we do is we begin working on the AIMS application during the T5 process. So many of you have already been contacted by what's called your Turning 5 team. The Turning 5 team is 99% of the time, it's the psychologist and/or social worker in your local community school. And what they're going to do is they're going to contact you. They're going to let you know that they are the primary party that's responsible for crafting and developing a school-aged IEP, so that when your child enters kindergarten, they have a legal document, an IEP, that is appropriately and meaningfully constructed to meet all of your child's IEP-related needs in a manner that accords with that aligns with some basic principles, what we call LRE, least restrictive environment, and free and appropriate public education. So the Turning 5 team handles everything except the AIMS program application, but we collaborate. We work together. If there's anything we need, any assessments, things like that, Ms. Mays and I will reach out to the Turning 5 team. If you have applied to the AIMS program and you don't know who your Turning 5 team is yet, email me and let me know if you haven't been contacted, and I can get that information for you. Okay, so what we do is we reach out to the Turning 5 team. You'll receive an email confirming receipt of the application. And if you haven't spoken to myself or Ms. Mays or Mr. Corallo yet, within the next couple of weeks, you'll get a call basically reiterating what I just said to you. And so what's going to happen is over the next couple of months, you're going to have an IEP meeting that's hosted by the Turning 5 team. In almost all likelihood, there will not be a decision on the AIMS program, but don't worry, that's not a bad thing. Nothing that happens at that meeting impacts your AIMS program application. So teams, Turning 5 teams, they move forward. There's certain guidelines and timelines that they operate under and things like that. So they're going to go forward and they're going to recommend a program. And everyone at the meeting will know, but Johnny or Mary, my child still has an AIMS program that is being worked on. Fine, not a problem. And the Turning 5 team, they'll explain their rationale for offering the program. You can agree with it, you can disagree with it. You have a number of rights and protections afforded to you as parents. The Turning 5 team will explain. If you have any questions or disagreements, we want to make sure that the IEP process, that parents' rights and due process is honored and understood. Subsequent to the Turning 5 meeting, you'll hear from us with a decision one way or the other. If we move forward and we offer a seat in the AIMS program, you will have an opportunity to, and I apologize, I just see someone is saying that they emailed an application in. Absolutely, we get a lot of applications. So if you emailed an application within like the last week or two, it's possible just because of the volume, you haven't heard back from us, but don't worry, we have it. If you haven't heard back in a couple of days, call or send another email. But again, at this time of year, we get a high volume of applications. And so sometimes we get backed up, and then last week was a 4-day week, and with some of the administrative stuff, it's easy to fall behind on that, but you will absolutely hear from us. So subsequent to the Turning 5 meeting, you'll hear from us. If we offer a seat, you'll be informed as to which site we're offering. Almost always it's the site located in the borough of residence, with the obvious limitations that we only have single site, in most boroughs it's only a single site. So this, travel can be an issue, but families are afforded an opportunity to go by the school, to meet the staff, to view the program. And if you accept, you have a second IEP meeting with your Turning 5 team, very quick. It's called a reconvene, where they update the initial program recommendation and they modify the IEP in the reconvene process to reflect all the AIMS program mandates. In the event that a seat isn't offered, we would certainly explain why. Maybe the child has had a growth in language and communication or other things, the family's happy with the program that was offered, whatever. We would certainly explain why, but at that point, the program recommendation would kick back to what was initially offered in the meeting. Again, there's a couple of questions. I see them popping up, but I'm going to hold off. I promise we'll get to as many as we can. So next slide, please. When we go through the eligibility process, what we do here is we get in touch with the family, we get in touch with the schools, and we do as thorough and comprehensive a review of all of the information as possible to get a sense of where your child is functioning. So that often entails turning 5 updates, any testing that we may need. We may ask the Turning 5 team to do some testing. What we're going to do is look in a very detailed way at the child's, the preschool teacher reports, the speech and language provider, the OT, things like that. So we do a pretty extensive and comprehensive review, which is another reason why our process takes a little bit longer. We have a lot of applications, kind of a limited staff. I think another very important reason is we want to ensure that this is a fair and equitable process. So kudos to every family that has applied and to be on top of things and to be proactive in the process, absolutely. But for a number of families, for many families, through no fault of their own, maybe they move, or certainly with COVID or other factors, they may not be aware of the AIMS program because we're so new. So we want to make sure we try to give families as much time to become aware of the program, fill out the application. For many families, through our first 4 years of existence, many families only hear about the AIMS program at the Turning 5 meeting the first time. They're not aware of it. Some preschools haven't heard of us yet, or they didn't think to connect us with, the child that they're working with. And so we want to make sure that every family has an equal and fair chance to have their child considered. So that's, issues around equity and fairness. We don't want any group to be to have an unfair advantage, or, we want to have as level a playing field as possible when considering applications for the limited number of seats that we have. Next slide, please. Okay, so we look at language and communication. We look at all of the information, adaptive behaviors. We look at, and we just want to get a sense in, many of the youngsters that come into our program, many aren't toilet trained yet, many still have issues with feeding, dressing, transitioning, things like that. So in the AIMS program, that's fairly typical. So adaptive behaviors, what we call daily living skills or adaptive behaviors, these are fairly common issues that we work with in the AIMS program that uses ABA as its methodology that we can address. Behavior and socialization, as you might imagine, as all of the families here know, having a child who has significant limitations with language and communication is obviously going to impact behavior and socialization, right? So that's something that we look at. Some students come into the program and they have significant delays in language and communication, but they may show increased levels of joint attention or increased levels of interest, or a more of an emerging sense of a kind of capacity for socialization while it's still delayed. Others are still operating more in parallel play or solitary play, and their ability to identify and integrate themselves in larger activities, group activities, 3 or more, is still significantly delayed. So we look at that. One of the things we will look at in our program is, because we don't have one-to-one behavior paraprofessionals in our program, for those youngsters that may present with behaviors that present significant health and safety concerns, we would review that. The team gets on board and we speak, and we want to make sure that those behaviors could be managed. So anything that presents a significant health or safety risk, we would want to look at. It wouldn't immediately preclude the child, but we would just want to make sure that those types of behaviors can be appropriately supported in the AIMS program. Next slide, please. So what we're going to do is we're going to ask the Turning 5 team to reach out, and if you haven't done this recently, to conduct an updated autism scale measure with you. That's a very quick questionnaire. Many of them just do it with a preschool teacher who can also do that. They're going to do what's called an adaptive behavior scale. This is a little bit more comprehensive. It's dozens of items. It can take 15 minutes to a half hour, but it's going to give us a broad-based overview of all of the areas of adaptive behavior and functional development. So language, socialization, feeding, transitioning, things like that. And we get a good sense of where the child is developmentally. And some of you have outside resources that you may be using. Maybe you have an outside speech provider. Your child may be receiving ABA or previously received ABA services from a BCBA. So what we do is we encourage families to submit that information. You can email it to the AIMS program. You can email it to me or Ms. Mays, and we'll look at any outside information that you think is relevant and you would like to be considered as part of the application review process. Okay. Next slide. Okay. Yeah, you can move on. This is just the assessments that we do. Yeah, and then this is kind of what I had mentioned before in terms of placement. You go through the IEP process. You'll hear from us. But again, during the Turning 5 process, if you don't hear from us for a while, for January and February and even into March, there's no problem. We're just doing the work of reviewing all the information, calling preschools, calling classroom teachers, calling speech and language providers, right? But you have carte blanche. You, as especially the Turning 5 parents, but any parent, you can feel free at any time to call myself, Ms. Mays, email us. If you're a little nervous, you haven't heard from us, absolutely. We understand that it's such an important process and there's a lot of anxiety. We get it, tied up in that all important jump from preschool to school age. So even if you just need some reassurance, hey, I just want to make sure everything's moving along, you have carte blanche. I don't care when it is, 2 o'clock in the morning, you're not going to hear back from us, but send an email, call and leave a message. It's fine. We want to be here to work with you. It's just for the next couple of months, we are doing that kind of the clinical work, the meat and potatoes of the application process. Okay. Oh, and so just one thing, Julene, are you able to back up? So when a child is placed in the AIMS program, and we'll talk about this, and Julene is going to pick up on this a little bit on the next slide, but the IEP that you have developed at the Turning 5 process is kind of, think of it as the starting point. It's an important document. It's going to provide a detailed and rich and comprehensive assessment of your child's current level of skills and those target goals that we want to work on to help them continue to develop in the way that we all want them to. In the AIMS program, we use an assessment and instructional approach, ABA, that is supported by something called the ABLES. The ABLES is the assessment of basic language and learning skills. And it's a very, very thorough diagnostic tool that measures children's skills across multiple areas of functioning that align themselves very well with an ABA-VB approach. So when a child transitions in, and AIMS schools aren't the only one that uses it. ABLES is used by a number of District 75 organizations in the city. So when your child comes in, right, the AIMS program, what we do is we do two important things. The first is we do something called pairing. We know that this transitions can be difficult for children on the AIMS, on the autism spectrum. So we want to make sure that the learning environment is as motivating and enjoyable and as rewarding as possible. So what looks like fun and games early on isn't actually that. It's really an attempt to provide and create an environment that the child wants to go to so they feel connected. We call this pairing. The child pairs all the staff in the building with pleasant and motivating feelings. So it gets them invested in their new site. And then at the same time, we're also doing the ABLES. We're running this very thorough diagnostic assessment that will then sit with you, we'll discuss the results, and then we want to sit and incorporate that information into the child-specific program. ABA, as you're going to hear in a moment, it's very, very detailed, very scientific, all about the data. It's not really, it's not that intuition is bad, but if we make a decision, we're going to have a lot of data to sit back on and say, this is why we're moving forward. This is why we're readjusting this approach. This is an area where the student is doing well, but this is an area where we're going to divert some resources to work here, and you're going to see a wealth of data. A lot of that comes from the ABLES and then the subsequent programs that we run in class. Okay? Okay, Julene. So ABA is, again, like I was saying, it's a scientific methodology, a social scientific approach that uses the principles of behavioral psychology to address overall behavior. In our case, verbal behavior is specific to language and communication. So it's a flexible approach that isn't confined to one specific way of working with a student. We use it across the classroom, across the school, but it's very, very data-driven, and it revolves around observable and measurable behaviors and targeting and tracking things that we can work on so we can know how successful we're being, where we need to improve, or where we have been successful and we can adjust. Okay, so ABA is, you're going to talk, for those of you that aren't familiar with ABA, there's going to be a lot of conversations you're going to have with your school staff and teachers about data and collecting data and monitoring and progress monitoring and data progress. That's really at the core of the AIMS program, the ABA methodology, right? It can work with a variety of different areas: language, behavior, communication, adaptive behavior, toileting, feeding, things like that. But it's an intervention approach. It's a methodology that really relies on science, right? It's tracking and monitoring behavior in a way where when all parties sit down, we can take a look and say, this is the growth we've seen, or this is an area where things have kind of plateaued, and as we track and monitor, we're not seeing the growth that we've seen before, so this is why we're going to adjust and we're going to move to implementing this type of approach. Okay, and so applied behavior analysis uses the classroom as the playing field, and all of the providers, the teacher, the paraprofessional, the speech provider, to track, identify, monitor, and adjust goals in the service of the child's development. Okay. The point person in this is what's called the BCBA. I mentioned this when I first started. A BCBA is a board certified behavior analyst. So another really unique feature of AIMS that makes it so desirable is that in addition to having the speech and language provider in the classroom, each AIMS site has a dedicated BCBA on site to help. They're not a supervisor, but this is someone who's professionally certified and trained and recognized as an expert in ABA. So a board certified behavior analyst works with the three classrooms: the teachers, the speech providers, the paraprofessionals, administration, families, the students in the classroom, to make sure that the ABA methodology is being run in the correct way, because there's really specific and very important teaching approaches that you have to make sure you're doing the right way, because if the teaching isn't being done in the way that it's supposed to be, the data is going to be flawed, right? So the BCBA is the expert there that helps everyone make sure that we maintain fidelity and that we're running an ABA program in the way that it's supposed to be done, right? And that's you know, it's new. AIMS is something that it was incorporated in. It's been very successful. The BCBAs, in many ways, they're kind of the linchpin and the kind of the, I don't want to say the key component, but they really are the part of the program that kind of keeps it as the glue and pulls it all together, because they're the experts in ABA. Okay. This is just like we had mentioned before, just the classroom setting. You have the teacher, the paraprofessional. If your child is recommended for any other services, such as physical therapy, occupational therapy, things like that, absolutely. If they're required, if it's part of their IEP, that's a legal document. They're entitled to receive it. We'll make sure that it is incorporated into their daily schedule, their weekly schedule, and their IEP. But the staffing of the program, like I had mentioned, it's the speech provider in the classroom with the teacher, the paraprofessional. The BCBA kind of manages all the classrooms. You're going to hear a lot from that individual. And then whatever other related services are required are written into the IEP, as it would be for any other student at any other school in New York City. Okay. And again, these are the mandates. The speech at this time, the speech mandates are 5 periods of speech per week individual. So each student gets 5 individual sessions of speech with the provider in the classroom, and 1 group in a group of 2. So that's 6 sessions of speech. They work with the classroom teacher doing what we call ITT, intensive training. Intensive training teaching. There's opportunities for group work, especially as students progress through the program, if their ability for language and communication, for meaningfully communicating their needs and wants expands, as is our hope, and they're able to work in a setting bigger than 1, we want to certainly facilitate that. And off the top of my head, I can certainly think of a couple of students that we work with where they really have done quite well in the program, in no small part to the parents' efforts and supports, the staff for sure. And so they're demonstrating more social awareness. That they still need support in that area, but some of the work they're doing, they're moving more towards group-based learning, which is, what we want to see in terms of independence and self-sufficiency. Okay. And again, I don't want to be redundant. This is what I had mentioned before about pairing and the ables. So when they come into the classroom, when they first start, we're creating a very, very enjoyable and motivating environment. That operates straight off the principles of behavioral psychology. If someone's not motivated, if they're not interested in something, it's going to be hard to get them invested in learning, right? So we want to create an environment where the child enjoys coming to school. I'm not trying to wave the flag for Ames, but I think that's one of our strengths. We do that pretty good. Most families that have been through the program often comment on how quickly their child has adjusted and enjoyed, looks forward to coming to school. And then we run that ABLES, the comprehensive assessment that then guides us in terms of the targets and goals. Okay, all right. Here's the classroom design. It allows for different areas in which the ABA work can be conducted. They have the outside therapy rooms. Sometimes you have therapeutic areas within the classroom, independent work areas, what we call workstations, play areas that look like play, but they're really there also as motivators and reinforcers to help shape behavior. Group areas where those children that are capable of doing group work can work in a setting of 2 or 3 if need be. Individual areas, and all of these areas allow for ABA to be conducted. So ABA isn't something where you just sit down and do it at a desk. No, you can conduct ABA in natural environment responsive teaching in any setting, and that's how the AIMS program is constructed. So in many ways, it's a typical classroom in the sense that it has all of those components that you would expect in a classroom, but it's also a highly specialized program, and the classroom is specialized because we think about where we place things, how the classroom is structured, what goes where to maximize the learning efficiency.
Okay, thank you so much, David. I wanted to mention 2 unique resources that are available to our AIMS parents. The first is access to the Rethink platform. It's an online platform, but it's a lot more than a website. It provides a wealth of support for our families. You can get parent trainings with step-by-step instructions on how to shape your child's behavior or teach new skills at home. You can monitor your child's data through Rethink. They also have classes and resources on social emotional health and wellness for parents. I know that very often it's parents who are working so hard to support your child with special needs and their siblings that sometimes you don't really get a chance to focus on yourself. And as the expression goes, you can't pour from an empty cup. So there are resources that we think for that. Also for, like I did mention, monitoring your child's data and a lot of different things that they do offer. This is a service that is free of charge to families in Ames. It is not free to the public, but it is for our families. It's something that we provide for additional support. Another is that we are right now having monthly live workshops on different subjects. The teachers of these workshops are usually one of our BCBAs or our coaches from the Office of Autism. Some of the subjects to cover it are communication and training and teaching EPL skills, how to use visual schedules and token boards and things of that nature to generalize some of the things that, or some, should I say, some of the strategies that the teachers are using, you can also use at home with your child. There was a workshop on how to use the Rethink platform to its best benefit. I gave one myself on OPWDD, which I'm going to mention in a moment, is one of my roles as a social worker for the Ames program. Is aside from helping the Dr. Borg during the T5 process, doing some observations, either myself or him is likely to be one of the first people that you meet with early in the journey. Once your child is seated in Ames, I'll continue to support you in any way that I can. If you need support applying for benefits, SSI or OPWDD, which I absolutely recommend to all families, whether or not you join the Ames program, is to get your child enrolled as soon as possible. It is a benefit that they'll have throughout their entire lives, and the earlier that you get started, the better. Of course, as we know, it can be very daunting, so I will do everything that I can to support you through the process with getting all the assessments that you need, and just anything else. Sometimes a parent is looking for a school program, for example, or health providers for special needs children, or if you have some correction, maybe you're looking for an APA provider or anything like that. It's definitely my job to help you look for these things. I always keep a database. Just let me know in what way I can help and support you. Can I facilitate communication between you and the classroom staff or the administration? Are there any assessments that your child needs? I am available pretty much anytime. And I look forward to meeting every one of you parents out there. Also, if you need help communicating with outside agencies, sometimes they can be a little bit more responsive to me than as a social worker for the Department of Education than they are with a parent. That's what I'm here for. And with all of that, I look forward to meeting you all. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks, Julene. You can stay active. We can maybe go through some of the questions. So there's a number of questions in the Q&A in the chat. Let me just kind of run through some of them here. Tatiana, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so the first, Dominique. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Tatiana.
Oh, no, I was going to say, if you want, I could read them for you and you could just, whatever's easiest.
I don't mind. So she was just asking about Ames and Horizon, the difference. So I don't work with them anymore. That was how I initially, my foray into specialized work with children identified with autism about 10 or 12 years ago now. So Nest and Horizon have their own website. They're separate and distinct programs in the DOE. You would certainly want to reach out to them. The basic issue the basic difference between, say, Nest, Horizon, and Ames would be that children in Nest and Horizon are generally in a kind of generalized way, I'm going to say, they're typically able to work in a community school setting, meaning that their language and academic skills and overall level of development certainly requires supports for issues specifically related to autism, but their ability to use language and communication and to engage a more traditional academic curriculum is intact enough that they can receive those services in a community school setting. So Nest and Horizon, as far as I'm aware, their programs are exclusively located in community school settings. For AIMS, because our students have they are at the earliest levels of emerging language and communication. If you don't have language and you don't have a meaningful way of communicating your needs and wants, a traditional kindergarten curriculum, which is pretty intensive nowadays, right? It's not like when I was in kindergarten 50 years ago. It's a lot. It's hard, right? And so we have to build those prerequisite language and communication skills, which is why we have a 12-month specialized school and specialized environment. But absolutely reach out. If you Google ASD Nest or ASD Horizon, they have, I think their email is ASD specialized programs at schools, but reach out. The staff there is great. They'll let you know. Is busing provided in the AIMS program? Absolutely. We're a specialized program. And so if your child is admitted into the AIMS program, even if you live down the block, and we have a couple of families with children in pretty close walking proximity, but you are absolutely entitled to busing, what we call specialized busing, as part of the IP. Just in some cases, I was just in our Queens school the other day. We have a child coming from a pretty significant different distance across Queens, literally just about all the way across Queens, but it's working. Family loves it. It's a little bit of a ride, but the family's invested. They want the program. The child is doing well, but you are absolutely entitled to door-to-door busing. For anyone who has a child who presents with significant medical or health-related needs that you think may impact busing, talk to your Turning 5 team about additional modifications. So in busing, talk to the Turning 5 team. I just want to have a caveat that I don't know that this is 100%. I'm 99% sure that when your child gets busing, usually it's the closest location, curb, closest location, right? And there's a matron on the bus. But if you think that there's other types of transportation related supports, you have to go through a medical process. You have to have your pediatrician or any type of medical clinician fill out a form. It gets submitted to the Turning 5 team. Then a DOE physician reviews it to determine whether or not those specialized supports are approved, okay? Ms. Saucedo, please email me. I see, did you get the application? I will take a look. My email, Julene, can you go to the, actually, we'll hold off on that. We have a couple more slides, but I will absolutely take a look to see if we had it. Is Rethink Ed Dominique again? Ms. Goyette Nadeau is definitely on top of things. This is great. Is Rethink Ed also available to ASD Horizon families? I don't know. I'm no longer affiliated with the program, so I don't want to sound like I'm avoidant, but I just want to keep boundaries. So you can reach out. They will absolutely let you know if Rethink has a relationship with them. Rethink does a lot of things in the DOE. They work with us in terms of providing additional BCBA supports and professional development. They even, as Julene was saying, they do some things for families, but I don't know the nature of their relationship with Horizon. So I apologize, but I don't want to confuse families. I don't want, this is not, I say this with love and compassion. I hope it's received in that way, but this is, I just want to speak exclusively to AIMS and not the Nest and Horizon programs, because they have a separate structure and they work with a child with a different profile, but they're super responsive and they'll get back to you definitely on that. Dominica, yeah, my understanding is that ASD programs are supposed to be expanding in the coming years. Are you planning to expand? Okay, so Miss Goyette Nadeau, outstanding. You're quite, you actually, she's reading our mind, Julene, because she knows what the next slide is. So I'm going to jump to the next couple of slides and with Miss Goyette Nadeau's question. Hold on, she's good. We got to get a job for her here. This is amazing. So the future of AIMS, the slide that's up now. the honest answer is, we don't know. We expanded this past year. We added that extra site in the community school. Families, as Ms. Goyette is asking in her questions, are you going to expand sites? That's a decision that we don't have here. That comes from the highest levels of the DOE, and I know that there's interest from families, and families are very proactive and involved. So I would imagine that information has filtered its way up, but I as the psychologist for the program, I can't really comment on that. So in terms of a vertical expansion across the city, we started off with 5 sites. We're up to 7. So we've added 2 sites, during the COVID years. So that's encouraging, I suppose. Expanding beyond 3rd grade, we don't have any specific plans on that. We do have many families that inquire about that. One of the things that families, I think in general, have felt satisfied with is that after articulating out of 2nd grade into 3rd grade, they stay in their school, the same District 75 school, if it's warranted. At the IEP meeting, if they still need a small class setting, they are entitled to stay in that school. So we do have classes in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade that continue to use an ABA-VB model. So it's not like at the end of 2nd grade, boom, that's it. And the child then has to switch schools. It's a different methodology. And those 3 years of work suddenly become at risk. That's not, there's a consistency and coherence to what happens after 2nd grade, staying in the same building, continuing to work with an ABA-VB methodology. And at that 2nd grade IEP meeting, the annual review, or what's called the triennial, the mandated 3-year review, like any other IEP process, we sit down, we take a close, long, hard look. How's the child doing? Where do they need supports? And we hope for the best. We want to see continued growth. And for some children, that may mean movement to a less restrictive environment, maybe a class of 8, or more. Maybe some schools, they stay in a 6, but maybe it's the school has developed a 6 that has children with stronger language and communication. They still benefit from a 6, but maybe they're using a PEC system more independently, a picture exchange system. Maybe they have a technology-based device, an SGD, speech generating device, or a device that has what's called Proloquo, where it has the icons, right? There's a field of 16 or a field of 9, and they can point and say what they want, and they become that. So maybe there's a classroom still of 6, but for children with, they're not at the emerging level anymore. There's a little bit more independence and self-sufficiency. Okay. So thank you, Ms. Goyette, for those questions. You're clearly a parent who's, as all parents are, super on top of things. Let me just go through the chat now.
David, actually, we have one parent, Mr. Moncayo, asked, what are the chances of getting a seat with so many candidates?
So it's a perfectly fair and valid question. I don't have a quantifiable answer at this point. But I think Mr. Moncayo is speaking to what I had mentioned earlier, that we're still a new program. We have 114 seats in the city right now. They're all accounted for. So what will happen is seats will open up. We allocate seats for turning 5 students coming into the program in September as 2nd graders move out. And then if new programs open up, as those seats become available. So I would never be anything other than honest or transparent. There's a lot of applications for a limited amount of seats, but it's also one of the reasons why we take a little bit longer. We want to make sure we take a close, hard look, and we don't play favorites or have preferences. At times, it's if we have 5 seats available in a borough, or 7 seats, whatever, and there's 30 applications. These numbers are complete hypotheticals. It's talking with the families, and then at some point it just becomes, it's not giving preference to any family in particular. At some point we sit down and discuss, and it may just be at that point, it's, something akin to a lottery, right? It's here we have these applications, and these are the children we're going to move forward with, because that's what happens in a smaller program you may get. So what we try to do, and sometimes it can be frustrating for families because it takes a little bit longer, but we want to be fair and equitable. We don't want any family to have an unfair advantage in any way. We want to make sure every child, every family is given equal and fair consideration for placement, regardless of anything about that family, regardless of where they live, regardless of anything. But we have 114 seats that are all filled right now. At this point, I don't know. So we're working with our program. We're looking at how many seats we expect to have available. So it's possible that we have had conversations. There may even be parents on here today where, we said at this time, we'll continue to monitor your child's application, because that's what we run into as I don't know if we're still officially a pilot program. I'm not sure what the timeline, the statute of limitations on a pilot program, but we're going to be entering our 5th year. And like I said, we have double the number of applications. And this is something that I track as on the front end of the process. The same day last year, I just did this a couple of days ago, at the same day last year versus this year, we literally had double the number of applications, which is good in some ways. And it's not, I don't want to discourage families, but it's also, it is what it is. So I wish I could give an answer that would make people happier. I know it probably doesn't, but I need to be honest and truthful.
We do have some other pre-registration questions
Sure.
That parents wrote. So one of the questions that a parent wrote was, how is Ames different from other District 75 schools? And is there any data to track performance upon leaving Ames compared to general D75 kids and a 6-to-1, 8-to-1, or 12 1-to-1?
So those are great questions. So I would say the first part of that question, Tatiana, is kind of what I outlined in the presentation. So the speech and language provider in the classroom, the BCBA being on site, having Rethink as a parent partner, having their online platform and the supports, having Ms. Mays and myself, but primarily Ms. Mays as the clinical social worker, providing direct supports and resources to families. These are all unique features, and running an ABA methodology in the way we do with the SLP, the speech and language provider. So those are some of the things that makes Ames unique and distinct from other sixes. And there are other organizations. The ABA VB isn't exclusive to Ames, right? There are other schools and District 75 organizations that use that methodology. And even within, say, for example, if you live in the Bronx, 10X, right? Yes, they have an Ames site, but all of their sites, they have sites on Jerome, they have sites on University, they open up a new site, they have sites throughout the Bronx. They use in their smaller class settings an ABA VB approach. So I've worked with a number of families over the years and we said, okay, unfortunately we're not going to be able to move forward, but it looks like you got placement at 10X. So you're in an organization that's essentially using the same methodology. In terms of the data tracking and monitoring, so within the program itself, that's one of our fortes, right? So you can see and you can assess student growth relative to the skills that we outline. I think what the parent is asking, though, it's a very sophisticated and excellent question. It's a comparative analysis looking at Ames students versus students in general. That I don't have information on. What I would suggest, if the parent is interested in that, to reach out to Mark Corallo, the director of the Office of Autism, whose email will appear in a moment. And he would be the person that would know if and how the Ames data is taken, amalgamated, and then used comparatively with students in other programs. I don't have information on that, but it's a great question. It's an important question. So let's see. Tati, I'm just going to rip through these if you don't mind, or if there's any
absolutely,
that you want to
go
address.
ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So I see Mr. Moncoya's question. What's the age limit? So, well, typically the age limit is 6, but that's not a hard and fast rule. We take applications for any student up to first grade. So if a child is still in first grade and the application goes through and they're seated, so most kids, that's 6. Some students are still 7 in first grade. So it's not an age. We take applications at turning 5, kindergarten, and first grade. Yeah. Oh, so some of the families, the parents are great here. This is amazing. They're doing my job for me. Love it. I want to, again, we want to be open and honest, and sometimes we can get overwhelmed here. We do a lot of outreach. We fall behind. If you have sent in information you haven't heard from us, we are doing our best to catch up. Many of the turning 5 families, you received an email. A significant number of you have probably heard from me directly. If you haven't, over the next week or two, you will. next week for sure. So if you haven't heard, if you submitted an application and you haven't got the confirmation email, absolutely send an email. If you got the confirmation email, but you haven't heard from me, you'll have my message say, hey, Dr. Borg, give me a call when you can. But I'm essentially going to repeat what was just done here, but that's fine. I think it's much more reassuring and important for families to have a one-to-one conversation, to give them that private time and that specific one-to-one attention that they deserve to answer any questions. Because a lot of times during a one-to-one conversation that I have with families on the phone, other things come up and parents will say, oh, by the way, you know, this or the preschool. So and if not myself, Ms. Mays or Mr. Corallo, you will definitely be hearing from us.
I just wanted to mention I'm dropping our contact information into the chat.
Okay,
so you can contact us.
Go to the next slide.
Oh,
I think we're on the next slide, right? There you go.
oh well, there is that.
Yeah.
I forgot.
Mr. Moni, okay, yeah. So a lot of the families, yeah, they're just in the comments. It's about the program and the seat availability. I get it. I get it. Yeah. OPWDD, Mr. Moncoya. So Mr. Moncoya, who I think I spoke with last week, if I'm not mistaken, he's a parent who's he's versed and he has a lot of experience and he's been proactive in the process. Yeah, Mr. Coleman, I don't have information on that, but I would suggest any parent who's interested in a broader base analysis of the data, reach out to Mr. Corallo. I'm a little bit of a statistics nerd, not nerd, but just as a PhD in clinical psychology, we have to do research and dissertations. So I always kind of enjoyed that, but my plate is full as it is. But I think that type of comparative analysis is very important.
I wanted to mention some parents in the chat were discussing OPWDD and what sort of a long process is, and I wanted to absolutely agree with someone that said it is long, but it is worth it, particularly if you get self-direction. And I wanted to mention, if you, whether or not you're applying to AIMS, to feel free to drop me a line through email. I can send you a lot of information or make you referrals. I know when Dr. Borg is speaking with parents in the application process, it's one of the things that he always does is to find out what is your status. Do you need any help with OPWDD? So I want to say, please feel free to reach out if you want any help or assistance. We'd be happy to help.
Thank you, Julene. Oh, sorry, Dr. Borg.
No, go
I
ahead.
was going to say we do have another question in the Q&A from Miss Stephanie. She says, what is the child's cognitive level in the AIMS program?
Great question. Thank you, Ms. Yao. So it can vary. So we don't have in our assessment process, we don't specifically ask for our teams to do what we call a full psychoeducational assessment in the way that some of the other ASD applications, Nest and Horizon, they have a more involved process. And the reason we don't what some people might refer to as a traditional IQ test and things like that. And when a child lacks functional language and communication, that might be an artificial variable in depressing scores that doesn't necessarily indicate the child's cognitive potential. So we have a lot of students in the program that, although they don't have language, their rate of learning and the rate of change, right, learning acquisition, it could be solid, right? There may be delays, certainly with language, right, what we call verbal intelligence, the use of language-based means of identifying, processing, and then acting on information. Absolutely. So cognitive performance, unless there's something that would really, really significantly impact the child's ability to meaningfully participate in the AIMS program, it's not anything that we would say, immediately no, right? Because most of our kids, if they try to sit with an unfamiliar person to do standardized psychological testing, right, the T5 psychologist, they're not going to be able to do it through no fault of their own. children, especially children who are deeper into the autism spectrum, they don't do well with strangers. They don't do well in certain situations. They don't do well with non-preferred activities. But that's not an indictment of their cognitive potential, their learning ability. That's a function of autism. So we're not going to hold autism against them. We know that our kiddos struggle in situations like that. So we don't want to put this artificial burden or this artificial standard that it's not that it's meaningless, but it's that type of assessment. You have to, there's a lot of intricacies around it. So there's probably a range of intellectual functioning within the program, but we don't make it a specific point of looking at that in the way that some of the other programs do, because language and communication impairments could have that impact on standardized testing. I hope that was a little bit of a technical psychological question, so I hope I wasn't too jargony on that. I hope that made sense. If not, whoever the parent was that had that, Ms. Yao, please feel free to call me or email me, and I'd be happy to follow up in a conversation afterwards.
Thank you, Dr. Borg.
Sure,
and again, we have the space open for a few more questions. So if you have a question, don't be afraid to type it in the chat or in the Q&A box. But again, thank you so much, Dr. Borg and Julene, for being here today. If anybody does have any follow-up questions at the end of this presentation, you're more than welcome to email me, and I could definitely forward your questions to Dr. Borg and Julene. You guys will also be getting this information in a follow-up email as well. I also wanted to, Ms. Yamini does have a question. Can you share the BSI details also and the difference? Will this presentation be available at a later date? Yes, this presentation will be available at a later date. You will be able to find it both on our Facebook page as well as our YouTube page in the coming weeks.
Okay, and Ms. Passy, I'm sorry, BSI, what? I'm drawing a blank, I apologize. I just want to make sure, I'm not sure what BSI refers to. I feel like I should know this, so I apologize. If Ms. Passy would like to email me or follow up, I'm just not sure what the acronym stands for. So I don't know if she's still here or not.
Ms. Passy, if you're still here, again, you can email Dr. Borg directly for further clarification on BSI. And again, I want to thank Dr. Borg and Julene for being here today. Thank you, everybody who was here watching the presentation. This is such an important topic. I know lots of parents are always very interested, and this is one of our most attended webinars. So thank you so much for, presenting on this important topic. A lot of parents want to know about the AIMS program constantly. To everybody here, thank you again. I will be activating a poll. If you guys could please complete that, that'd be greatly appreciated. Again, this information will be shared with everybody, and the recording will be available for everybody to watch. So thank you once again, Dr. Borg and Julene.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tatiana. Thank you, families. Really appreciate it. We'll be in touch.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.